G'day guys, how are you? And welcome back to another video. In today's video we're going to speak about hashing and salting a password and why we should definitely do it in today's world. So let's begin. So before I start, I'm just going to give you guys a quick demo of, I'm going to use MD5 only because MD5 has indeed been, I think it's been cracked or hacked or whatnot. So definitely don't use MD5 for that matter. I'm going to use it now just to show you guys of what someone could potentially do and how exactly it works and why you should definitely salt a password. So let's begin. So I've just made a quick program here. And what it basically does is it converts the bytes of the text and then it encrypts those using MD5 and then it returns it as a readable text and not so much a byte, so it converts the 64 into a string. So if I was to run this program right now, type in my password, which is just pass, there we can see there's an encrypted password right there. Fantastic. But now if I was to use this program on another person's computer or another person's computer, if I was to type in the exact same word, the same encryption would pop up. This is wonderful for the fact that, if I did have an online database and I had an online login system for that matter, and I wanted to log in from another country and using a different computer, it would encrypt that, that string pass into the exact same bytes using MD5. Don't use MD5 please. And then it would obviously convert it into a readable text, and that's what I'd get every single time. Wonderful. The password hasn't been stored as plain text, because obviously that would be the first mistake. You don't want to be stored as plain text. You want to at least have some sort of encryption. That's great, but I mean, what happens if I had a database of 10,000 people? Chances are 1,000 people are going to have perhaps that same password, since it is quite obvious, or not obvious, but it's quite a commonly used password. Let's be honest, pass is quite commonly used. And to make matters worse, so let's say the database was breached by a hacker and they were to see that, hey, there are 10,000 people in this database, and out of 1,000 of those people, they all have the exact same hashed password. Okay, so then if the hacker was to do a bit of research, and that's the password there, if we just simply copy that and go to this website here, I've just simply gone to Google, I've typed in my hash there, I went to a few websites, and this one here definitely did give me the right result. So if I go to Control Find, and I find that hash, there it is there, and you can see that in plain text, so clear text, that is simply just pass. And that was indeed what the password was. As you can see, I've just typed in pass, and that was the encryption. So, I mean, it's not so much worry like, well, it is, but it isn't. If the hacker is able to breach into your database and get your passwords, I mean, it's not great. It's really not great. But what makes it worse is a lot of people will just use the same password for their email, for their YouTube, Facebook, eBay, PayPal, banking for that matter. They will just use the same password over and over again. So if the hacker is able to get, for example, this password here, and then is to work out, well, hey, the password in plain text is just pass, they've then got access to every single one of those accounts. And if you're Adobe, back in 2013, they were indeed hacked, I believe, from memory. Don't quote me on this. And they even stored the user's password hints. So they were finding that, say someone had an encrypted password like this, and there were, say, 1,000 people had the same encrypted password, and the hints were all relatively the same. They were able then to go, well, hey, the password is definitely then pass. Then they had access to every other account that email address was sort of allocated with that same password. So, I mean, that's quite scary. So I'm going to speak to you guys today about how we can indeed hash a password and then how we can salt it. So even if I was to insert the same password over and over again, the encrypted password will always be different. And that's what you want. You don't necessarily, I mean, if the hacker breaks into the database, terrible. But we want something to be unique, so it makes it a bit harder. And obviously if it's unique, if I was to copy, say, I'll just go back to this and I'll just copy this into Google. So let's say that's our password, but I'll just add a few characters here and there. That could be a salted password, for example. If I press enter, Google's like, what the hell, what is that? And now someone's probably just lost their job at Google because that didn't give me a result. That's what we want. We want something like that. So even if they do get that password like that, depending on how you salt it, the methods you go about it, so you can indeed store the salt in your database and then sort of combine the two together and then salt it once more, and then that'll be your final password. You can certainly do that, but the idea is we need something to be unique. So even if we do store that salt in the database, which is not usually a problem, a lot of people do it, we can combine those two passwords together to create a unique password, and then that will obviously create uniqueness. So I've also seen other people where they've got, like, say, the email address, and then so every email address is going to be different for that database. So we can't have two email addresses with this two of the same email addresses for two different people in the same database, because that obviously confused the login system. So they've actually used the email address as a salt and then combined those two together to create that unique password. That will also work. I mean, obviously, it may not be one of the best ways to do it, but I mean, it will certainly work and will definitely make, you know, hackers have a harder time. But I mean, just before we even get into the video, hackers will always and definitely find a way. I mean, you build a wall, the hackers, they'll climb over the wall. You build a higher wall, or they'll go under the wall. So then you build a wall that goes underneath the ground. Well, then the hackers, they walk around the wall. So then you build a wall that's, you know, as high as, you know, the sky, and as low as, you know, the core of the earth, and as wide as, you know, the ocean. Or if the hackers are strong enough, they'll just go through the wall. And then you build two walls, well, then they go through two, and so on and so on. You know, it continues. So they will always find a way. So the best thing that you can do is definitely salt these passwords, because I mean, it's one thing for you to sort of lack on security, but then if that user's name is, that password is decrypted, or they work it out, and then they're to, you know, go to Facebook and do some stuff and even banking and that, I mean, it's just not really good at all. And a lot of hackers will just post the address and password online, so it's kind of embarrassing. You know, that, you know, this website came from such and such and I was able to breach it, because 9 times out of 10, if you go to the source code of the website, you can see who made it. I mean, it's just how it is. So let's begin. Alright, so let's begin. So the very first thing I've done just before I've created the video is I've just made a table here. This is going to be our login system, and I've just got the ID as an integer, it's a primary key and it cannot be null. I've got the username as var characters 50, I've got the password as var characters max. And the reason why I've got max is, for example, if someone has like say a 25 character password, once we encrypt it and once we salt it, I mean, I don't really know how long it's going to be, so I can't exactly say, well, you know, it's 50 characters max, because it may not be, it could be quite long. And then just for our site, I've got that as, I do have that as 50 characters max, because once we generate the salt, I know that it's not going to be over 50 characters. So let's begin. So I've just got this done in VB.net. If you want this done in C#, do leave a comment down below. If you've got any questions, also feel free to leave a comment down below. So the very first thing we're going to do is just to make our form a lot neater, or our project a lot neater, is I'm just going to go here to project, I'm going to go to add class, and I'm just going to call it encryption. Okay, but you can name whatever you like. Also, if you haven't seen my previous video on making a DLL, once you've got your encryption class done, you could even export this to a DLL, so you don't have to keep writing out the code, and then each time you need to encrypt something, you could import the DLL, and it'll just make life a lot easier and save you time in the future. Okay, so now what we need to do is we need to create an RNG crypto service provider. Now the reason why we're using a crypto service provider is because if we were to use random, I mean, as you guys may or may not know, random is not exactly random. So it does indeed follow a seed or a sequence of random characters to use, which, you know, we would say, well, okay, well, it's random, but they're not actually true random. So yeah, they are random to a sense, but that's been programmed, and that's that. It does follow a seed. So if someone is able to break into the database, I mean, they could potentially work out that salt from that seed. So it is possible. It does happen, believe it or not. Obviously, it's not easy, but people do it. So, I mean, by using the RNG crypto service provider, we are guaranteeing a true random. So in order to get that there, just type in private, and we'll just call it crypto service provider, and it's going to equal system. So as a system, security, cryptography, and then we'll say RNG service provider. So this is indeed a true random. Okay, so I mean, I may be wrong, I'm not really sure, but just from the research and the study that I've done, people are saying that this is like a better method to use rather than using a random. Okay, so now we've got that, what we need to do now is we need to actually get our, like, encrypt our string, so we can create a private, and it's going to be a shared function, and I'll just call it encrypt string. We'll pass through the str as a string, and we're also going to return a string. Awesome, now we've got that, we need to get the bytes, so let's write dim bytes as a byte array, and it's going to equal system text encoding ASCII is what some people say. Get the bytes, and then we want to get the bytes of the string. This is where we hash it. Equals system security cryptography again, and then this is where we pick our encryption type or what we want to use. So in our case, we want to use SHA-256. I think I said earlier that SHA-256, there aren't many rainbow tables on this one, and even if there are rainbow tables, they aren't as complete as what MD5 is. Like I showed you, it was quite easy to find what that plain text password was. So use SHA-256 or anything else. Just do some research. Depending on when you're watching this video, I mean, SHA-256 may be cracked for that matter by then, I don't know, but yeah, just do research and just see which is the best one for whatever time period you're watching this video from. So we'll go create, and then we're going to compute the hash, and now it's asking for bytes, so of course we're going to use the bytes that we've already converted. And then once we've done that, we just simply want to return convert to string or base 64 string, and we want to return the hashed. Awesome, so this will indeed encrypt a string. That's one thing we've encrypted, but now we need to actually salt it. So to create a salt, we'll create this as a public because I'm going to have to use salts from a different class, which I'll create in a second. So our public shared, and it's also going to be a function because we're going to be returning a string. So let's write here generate salt as a string. And now I can say using, and I can use this crypto service provider that I've created above here as new system security cryptography RNG service provider. And now I need to create a string builder. So let's write dim sb as new system text string builder. I need to get the data. So like the data, I mean, you can have this as long as you want or as short as you want, but I usually put 3 bytes in there. You could put 4 or 6 or 12,000, I don't know. It's entirely up to you what you use. So let's write dim data as a byte array equals new byte, and I'll put 4 in there for now, and then some curly braces at the end. Awesome. So now what we do is we go for I, or for C, or for N, or for G, whatever you want, equals 0 to 6. You could put 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20, whatever you like once again. Then we use a crypto service provider. We will tell it to get the bytes, so we're getting it from data. And then we'll write here dim value. So this is where we're going to convert it into a string. As a string equals bit converter. And then to string. And we want to convert the data, so the byte. And then where do we want to start from? Of course, we're going to start from the index of 0. And then finally, once we've done that, we can append it in the string builder. So we'll append the value. So it will indeed become a string. So this is our salt. This is going to generate a true random. So after that, if you want to go one step further, well, we need to return a string anyway. So we can write here return, SB to string, and that will indeed return random characters at true random characters. But you could also encrypt this as well to make it like that, a little bit more confusing. So we can write here encrypt, because remember we've got our function down here that we've also created. So we'll tell it to encrypt that string, and then we can also encrypt the random characters that we've also created. So I mean, that's something else that you guys can also do. Okay, so once we've got that, because this is indeed private, I don't usually like to have this one here, like sort of in the open. So I usually just create another one, another sub or shared function for that matter. And I just call it hash string. We'll ask for a string. As a string, we are going to return a string, and then I can just write return encrypt string, and we want to return the whatever string the user types into the parameters. Awesome. So there's our class there that we need in order to encrypt a string or hash it, and then how to generate the salt. So if you guys wanted to, you could indeed use this code, copy it to a DLL, and then import it over and over and over again, just to save you guys writing it each time. I mean, I know it's only like 30 lines of code, but if you were to do that, say 100 times, it would definitely, save a lot of time that way. Okay, so now we've got that done. I'll just give you guys a quick example of how this encryption class does work, and then we'll move on to actually importing it into a database and how to read it correctly and log in and all that sort of stuff. Okay, so head back over to module 1. Okay, so I'll just write dim password equals encryption hash the string. So this will be our password, so I'll just write in there for the sake of it, password. Then we need to do our salt, so that will be dim salt equals encryption, generate the salt, and then once we've done that, we need to merge the two together. So I'll just write dim hashed and salted equals encryption hash the string, and we're going to hash it as a string.format. So we're going to hash them both together. So once we've got our password hashed, and then we've got our salt generated and also hashed, we're then going to merge the two together, and then we're also going to hash them as well, just to, that's 3 times lucky sort of thing, I guess, I don't know. So I'll put some curly braces here. So this will be the password, and this will be the salt, and then let's write here password and salt. So we'll put those there. So just to give you guys a quick demo, if I just go console.writeLine, I'll put in the password, and then I'll also put in my salt, and then when we merge those two together, it will hopefully look really, really confusing. No, this should be okay. So let's press F5 and see what happens. So as you can see here, here's our actual password that's hashed. That's it there. Then we've got our salt. So there's our salt code. And then when we mix the two together, it's going to look like that. You see? So this one here, we're not going to store in the database. That's just going to be for the user to type in and then we hash it. However, the salt itself will be stored in the database. Now, you might be thinking, well, isn't that a bit of a risk? Having that in the database, they could then mix the two together. Definitely, they could definitely log into our website, but the chances are these two codes here are not going to be in other websites, and it's going to that's the whole idea of encryption. You can encrypt something, but it's very difficult and near on impossible to go the other way. So you can't go from, this particular string here, which has been hashed and salted and then hashed once again. There is no way they can go backwards in 2017. I mean, I don't know, maybe whenever you guys are watching this, perhaps there is a way, I really don't know. But yeah, there's no way that this password is going to be in our database twice. And that's what we want. We want something to be unique, so that they can't say, well, 7 people have the same password, it must be something common. So if we would have just this in our database, chances are 10 people may have the same password called password. They could see that and go, oh, okay, well, that might be something that's, something that's quite common. But then by adding the salt and then merging those two together and then also hashing it, yeah, they can't have that password in there twice. I mean, that would just be highly unlikely. Remember, we are generating a random, the salt, which is just completely random anyways, and we're encrypting it, so it would be very, very difficult. Okay, so now we've got that done, we've got say an understanding of how this indeed works. We now need to be able to insert this into our database, and then we need to be able to actually log into our database using the hashed password and our salt. So what we're going to do is we're going to create another class, and I'm just going to call it DB Manager, and I'm just going to create a connection string. Okay, so now I've got my connection string, I've just imported system.data.sql client, and now what I can do is I can create a public shared function. And the reason why I like to create this particular function, which I'm about to create and show you guys, is because living over in Turkey especially, if I ever need to work on a database that is located within Australia, sometimes the connection can be really, really slow, and it's really, really difficult. But by creating this function here, I can ensure, without having to add anything to my connection string, that it's not going to time out. It's just going to wait and try and connect, because being all the way over here, for example, it can take quite a long time, and even 30 seconds can sometimes not be enough. So by creating this function here, I can do SQL open async. I'll put a wait at the front of it, so it's going to wait for the connection to open. Sometimes it does fail, I'm not going to lie, but that can be if I've waited for, say, over 2 minutes. So if it does happen to fail, I'll just do a write line here, and just put ex.message. And then finally, once we're out of that, we just simply want to return the SQL connection state. So if it's open, I think it'll be 1. If it's closed, it'll probably be 0. So that'll return that. So this also opens the connection, so I don't have to worry about now typing in all my queries, and when I create a command, I don't have to worry now about using SQL open. I can just simply say if connect server async, then execute the query. So that comes quite in handy too. Okay, so now I've got our function here created that's going to allow us to connect to the server. We now need to create another function, or another sub, which is going to actually allow us to log into the server. So this is quite a lot of code and maybe a little bit to take in. So if you've got any questions, do leave a comment down below, and hopefully we can help you out. So something public shared sub, and I'm just going to call it login, and I want to pass through my username as string, as well as the password as string. Now I'm going to write dim salt as string equals nothing because we're going to use a data reader which is going to read the salt from the database first. Type in now using SQL con as new SQL connection. Put in your connection string, which I created up here, but I've just done it in region so you guys can't see what the IP and all that is. Then I'm just going to do my command now, or my query. So let's write dim read salt, I guess. Query as a string equals, and I'll just write here select anything, although I could probably write salt, but I'll just do anything from login table where username equals @user. Probably like don't name the column salt. I've just done it just to show you guys like how it should be, but if you wanted to sort of perhaps try and fool if someone is to break into your database, probably don't name the column salt, call it something else if you can. That way they don't sort of put 2 and 2 together and figure out, well, hey, that's actually the salt, and then they could actually try and, you know, decrypt those passwords. So now I'm going to create my command, SQL command as new SQL command. Type in your query that we just created, so that's a read salt, and then the connection of where you want to put it to, or where you want to point that query. Then I'll just write SQL commands, parameters, add with value, user, and we want to type in here the username. Okay, so now this will be a great way to show you. Now that I want to execute this query, this connected async one here, I can either create a boolean or I can use an if statement. So let's write if connected to server, and then type in your connection dot result, which would be true. So if the result is equal to true, then we're going to do that. If you want it to be false, you could write there false, or you could say at the start here not, and that would be false as well. So if we are connected to the server, then of course we want to execute our query, or our command, but we're going to use a data reader. So I'm going to write here dim reader as SQL data reader equals SQL commands, and then we execute that reader. And then finally, we can say whilst the reader is reading, so whilst the reader is reading stuff from the database, we know that we want to get salt. So I'm going to write salt, which is the string we've declared up here. Salt will equal the reader, and now which column do we want to get? Well, we want to get the salt column. Like I said before, probably change the name from salt column to something else, and we simply just want to now put that to a string. Okay, so that's that. So then once it exits this while loop, we can close the reader, because remember we're still inside this if statement here where we are the connection is still open. So we want to close the reader just to sort of stop any potential errors that may happen. And the reason why we're going to close the reader is because we still need to execute another command. So I'm going to write here now dim pass equals encryption, and this is our hash string. So this is now our password that the user types in for the login. So now we're hashing that password. Then I'm going to write dim hashed and salted, just like before in the main forum, and I write here now encryption hash string, because remember we're hashing both of those together. So we're hashing the password, we're hashing the salt, but we're actually, in this case, we're reading the salt, which means that it's already been technically hashed. And then for the final stage, the hash and salted, we're merging those two together, and then we're hashing them once again, if that makes sense. So I'm going to string with formats, curly braces everywhere, and so it's going to be the pass, and then the salt. Awesome. So now we've got that done, we can now check for the login. So it's right here, dim check login query, I guess. As a string equals, and we'll do the count. So we'll select count anything from the login table where username equals @user and password equals @pass. So now we can create another command. So let's write dim SQL command 0 as new SQL commands. Put in our query we've just written, the connection of where you want to point it, and now remember the connection is still open, so we'll just write SQL command 0 parameters, and we're going to now link everything up. So that will be for the user, will be the username, and this command parameters, that will be value, the pass, and now this will be our hashed and salted password, just like that. And now because we are using a count, we're just going to read how many results it finds. So dim result as an integer equals converts to int32, and we're converting the SQL command 0. We're going to execute the scalia, just like that. And then finally, I know I told you this would be a lot of code, if the results are higher than 0, or you can actually do equal to 1, because what you could also do before when we insert a value, we could make it so it checks for duplicates. So I'll do it like that. I didn't think to do it like that before the video, but I'll do it like that. Instead of using my C# there. That would then mean, so if the result is equal to 1, which means that there's been one record has been found, because if we have two usernames that have the same username, that will make it confusing for when it's reading the salt. So let's write here, welcome, and then we'll just write, and username. So if it's correct, then it will say welcome username. Else, if it does not find, oops, wrong spot. And anything else, if it doesn't find it, for example, we'll just write here, console, right line, username or password was incorrect. Awesome. So there's our login query. I know it's a lot to take in, but yeah, I think this is a good way of doing it, and especially if you're beginning, sort of, you can find your own method, but this will be a good sort of starter to understand of how this works. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to create the function which is going to check for a duplicate user, and then once we've done that, we're going to then insert this data into our database, and then we can log in, of course. So right here, private shared function, and I'm going to do it as a function because I'm going to return a true or false. It's going to either have a user in there or it's not, so I call it duplicate user. And we're just going to ask for username as a string, and we'll do this as a boolean. And so now, using SQL con, this new SQL connection, put here our connection string, dim check user query, I don't know, a string. We can do that on select as well, so let's write select counts, and we only want to select it from the username, from login table where username equals @user. We'll create a command now, so SQL command is new SQL command. Put here our query and then our connection, so where we're pointing it to, and then we add the parameters. So SQL command parameters, add with value. We've told it that's going to be @user, and then we put here the username. And then finally, we'll just write if connected to the server dot results. Then, so if we are able to connect to the server, we then want to write dim results. So we're also going to do the counter as an integer equals convert to int32. SQL command execute the scalia. And now we want to count the results, so let's write if the result is higher than 0, meaning that it has indeed found a user, we want to return true, because that means that a user has been found. However, if it doesn't find, like if the results aren't equal over 0, then we want to return false. This is what we potentially want every time, because that means that it is indeed working. And let's just say, for example, it's saying right here that blah 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 is not returning. Are you missing a return statement? We certainly are. Let's just say if the query is unable to execute, we'll return false, and we'll return true, meaning that that user has been found. Just to sort of if something's wrong with the query, then we want to return true, just so we can stop it from inserting duplicate users. Okay, so now we've got our duplicate user function, which will hopefully return true if it does find a user, and if it doesn't find the user, return false. We now need to do what we've been waiting for, which is insert the new user into the database. So once again, we'll go public shared sub, and I'll just call it insert new user. So we've got username as string, and we want to also pass through the password as a string as well. Cool. So now I can use my duplicate user. So I can say if not duplicate user. So it's going to check to see if there's a duplicate user. If there isn't a duplicate user, it's going to continue in this block of code here. However, if it is a duplicate user, we could write a statement. We could say, hey, this user's already been added. We can do that later on down the track. So if there isn't a duplicate user, just write using SQL con as new SQL connection, put in our connection string, create the commands. So let's write dim insert new user as string equals insert into login table, and now the column that we want to use, we're going to use the username, the password, and the salt. And the values of that, I'm going to use parameters, of course. So we're at user, at pass, and at salt. Cool. So there's our query there. So now we will create the command. I think I said I was doing that for that one, but anyways, so you guys understand. As new command, we'll put an insert query, and then where we're pointing it to will be that connection there. Now we'll do our parameters, so we'll insert those. The user will be the username. The pass will be the password. And the parameters will be the salt. So I'm also going to have to pass through the salt from the parameters as well when we first get into this one. So let's write this salt. So that'll pass through the salt. And then once again, if we're connected to the server, the results, then we want to execute the command. And then we can write a little message once that's done, just to sort of let them know. So write that has been added to the system, I guess. So that's going to pop up with any username, whatever goes there, and it's going to say that that username has been added to the system. That's pretty much it. So if this has got a duplicate user now, from what I was saying before, Windows console, right line, string.format, and whatever username is already in the system. So there's our username. I'm going to do a return here, just so it gets out of there. Just so it doesn't get down to this line of code here. So if it doesn't have a duplicate user, it's going to run through all of these, insert those into the database. If the database is indeed connected, then it's going to execute the query. And then it's going to write a message saying that the such and such has been added to the database. There's no else, it's either going to do it or not. You could write, else there's been a problem, the server's not connected. However, with our server anyways, it should write an error, as you can see here, if it is failing anyways. So that's okay there. Then I'm just going to do return. So I'm going to do return because I haven't got this if not or else down here. I haven't got this part here in the else statement. So by returning there, we will be potentially skipping this line here because it's going to return back to the caller. Awesome. So this is pretty much it for how you're going to insert your data into the database. So now if we go back to module 1, I'll show you exactly what you need to type in now in order to insert the new username, and then how to log in afterwards. So I was going to write DB manager because that's the class we've created, and I can insert new user. And so that user, I need to create a username. So I was going to top here and write dim username as string equals Andrew Italy. So that's our username. So I'm going to type in the username because that's what it's asking for. Then it's asking for the password. This will be our hashed and salted password, okay? And then finally, it's just asking for the salt alone. So that'll be that one there. So that is going to insert those values into our database. So let me just comment that part there out. And then, so what I'll do then is we'll insert the data, and then we'll try and log in straight away. So write DB manager login. So the login is just asking for the username, and then it's asking for the password. So for the password alone, you can just type in your password. So in our case, it's just password. You don't insert the hashed string. Just insert the plain text password, because within that debug manager, it's going to take care of the encryption there for us anyways. So let's press Control F5 and see what happens. Let's see if we get any bugs. And straight away we've got one bug. It's expecting a brackets. Where are we? Right there. All right. Take two. Control F5. Look at that. It's done it straight away. So Andrew has been added to the system. And then it says there, welcome Andrew, because it was able to find those values and login. So if we head back over to our database and run a quick query, so we'll just write select anything from login table, F5. There you go. You can see that there's my username, Andrew, there's my password, and there's my salted password, which is different to the previous one that we did have. I can't remember it, but I know it didn't start with FS because I thought of a swear word when I was seeing that straight away. But you get the picture. So there's our details there. So now, if we run the program again and we try and log in with those exact credentials, so I'm just going to try and insert some data, and then I'm going to try and log in. So Control F5, and look at that, Andrew is already in the system, you see? And then it's obviously logged in and said, welcome Andrew. So if I go back to my database, run this query again, you can see that it hasn't inserted any duplicate usernames, which is what we want. We don't want to add duplicate usernames at all. So if I go back to my program once again, and I'll just add the username Andrew, Control F5, Andrew has been added to the system, welcome Andrew. If we go back to our SQL database, run this query again, you can now see we've now got two usernames. We've got Andrew, we've got Andrew, there's our password, which is exactly the same password. They're exactly the same, but as you can see, they're different because of the salt. And this is what we want uniqueness. So I could run this all day. I'll just type in another one. I could run this all day, and they'll never be the same. You see, they're not the same at all. So even the salt's different, which is to be expected, of course. We're generating random characters and we're hashing it. But the password here, they're all the same password, but they're different. So if anyone was to break into this database, for example, they would look at this and go, well, okay, well, obviously change to the salt column. You probably don't want that to be as obvious, you know. You could even perhaps mix them around just to throw them off if you really wanted to. You could say, well, this is the password and that's the salt, you know, just giving you guys ideas. Or you could even use the username as a salt as well, because that's always going to be different. They're never going to be the same. But yeah, so as you can see, the passwords are unique, and that's what we want. So there you go, guys. There's a quick tutorial on how you can hash a password, how you can salt it, then merge them together, and then insert it to a database, and then log into that database, and so forth and so forth. If you do have any questions, leave a comment down below. I'm sorry if this video went for too long and if I sort of, you know, explained too much. But like when I first started doing hashing and salting, like I was a little bit confused. I was like, what the hell? I didn't quite understand the whole concept. You know, people were saying, oh, well, the salt's always going to be different, but it's the same password. And I was like, well, how are you supposed to log into the database then? And then after some research, you know, people were saying, well, no, you store the salt in the database, and it doesn't really matter if that salt's there. What you want is uniqueness. So there you go again. Once again, if you did like the video, do comment, rate, subscribe. Any questions, leave them in the comment section below, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.